Hey there, this is Natalie, and in this video I want to talk about Kishirika Kishirisu. She is a Mushoku Tensei character who has only made a couple of appearances in the anime so far, but who is always memorable thanks to her outrageous personality and demon lolly character design. Kishirika, both in the anime and the Mushoku Tensei light novel series, is often something of a comic relief character. But that doesn't mean she doesn't have a whole lot of interesting lore behind her and her own significance in the plot. In this video, I'm going to be looking at her origins and the lore around her, as well as her personality. This won't spoil any upcoming plotlines from after the anime, but will include some extra information, including from side content like the prequel story Old Dragon's Tale. By the way, if you're interested in Old Dragon's Tale, I have started doing readings of the story on my channel, so check out part 1 of that video series if you want to listen to a very interesting prequel full of important Mushoku Tensei lore. Also, just as a quick reminder before I take a deep dive into the insanity that is Kishirika, if you like this kind of content, it really helps me out if you subscribe to my channel. I can't offer you a demon eye if you do, but I will be very grateful. And with the spoiler threat level and shameless begging for a subscribe out of the way, who is Kishirika? The first time we see her in the anime is prior to the mass teleportation incident, where a few characters who will appear later in the story, such as Orsted, are shown noticing the mana gathering. Kishirika tries to use her demon eyes to see who's causing this, but is unable to find anything out. Still, other than this cameo, the time we see her properly introduced as a character is when Rudeus gets his demon eye of foresight. While trying to get by after finding himself randomly teleported to the demon continent, Rudeus arrives in the port town of Windport and is advised by the man god, or Hitagami, to buy some food and walk a certain route. When he does, he sees what looks like a beggar girl being intimidated by a man. After chasing off the man, he realizes this is a young girl who claims she's starving. He gives her some of the skewers he'd bought, and she starts talking about how she's the great Demon Empress and will grant him a reward. Now, Rudeus thinks she's just a little kid doing some kind of make-believe Chunibyo type roleplay here, so he plays along, thinking he is just humouring her. After trolling him a bit with the idea of being rewarded with her body, Kishirika starts talking about demon eyes, and her own eye spins like a slot machine to demonstrate the 12 demon eyes she apparently possesses. She recommends to Rudeus the demon eye of foresight, which will allow him to see a short while into the future. An eye that can be very useful in combat once the user has gotten accustomed to it. Rudeus still isn't sure that she isn't just some weird child spinning a fantasy, especially given she's literally a beggar, and certainly doesn't seem like an empress of anything. But he's then shocked when she attacks his eye in what looks like an extremely painful way. After a few moments of agony, Rudeus realizes that she isn't just a psycho, as she has actually given him the demon eye she'd promised. She then makes a swift exit. Rudeus is pretty bewildered by this encounter, but there's quite a lot of information as well as characterization for Kishirika packed into this fairly brief scene, as well as in its light novel counterpart. For one thing, everything Kishirika says is true. She really is the Demon Empress, she really is engaged, and she really can survive for a year on just one meal. Kishirika is of the Immortal Demon race, and while she appears to be another example of the thousands of years old lolly trope, the reason she looks like a kid is because she reverts back to a child when she gets resurrected if she dies, and Kishirika has died quite a lot of times. There are depictions of her that characters sometimes come across that show her as a beautiful woman with large oppai, and it would seem like this is what she grows up to look like if she manages to live long enough. Of course, with a metabolism so slow that she can get by eating only once a year, she doesn't age at a human rate, so she will be in her lolly form for a long time to come. Her personality has not been affected by this, so even though she very much does come across as a simple-minded child, that's actually just what she's always like. Her reversion to a childlike form actually comes into play with the fiancé she mentions. He is another member of the Immortal Demon race named Baddie Gaby, and I'm not going to talk about him too much here because he does feature in the story later and I want to avoid spoilers in this video. But he and Kishirika really are in love, yet due to her only having the body of a child for now, Kishirika is okay with him having intimate relations with other women until she's physically matured. He is a huge demon with jet black skin, purple hair and 6 arms, but I'm sure it isn't too hard to guess which particularly thirsty female character from the series might be into that. We also see just from this scene that Kishirika is very weird. She's been alive for a very long time, something I'll get into in a minute, but like other characters from the Immortal Demon race, she hasn't become wise. She is very gullible and has no real sense of risk avoidance, so she often ends up in bad situations. I think the way the Immortal Demons like Kishirika are written is very interesting. As characters who only receive a bit of a penalty when they're killed, they're all pretty blasé about most things in life, and they have a terrible sense of time because it doesn't really matter for them. It wouldn't be unusual for them to turn up a century late for something, and while we see that Kishirika and Baddie Gaby do love each other, they go for what would be whole human lifetimes without seeing each other, and when they do, they kind of have a laugh together and then go off and do whatever it was they were doing again. Immortal demons also tend to be arrogant, even in situations where humility would work in their favour, like Kishirika here, where she's on the verge of starvation and begging. This makes sense, given these are actually characters who originate from a different world, where they were the dominant race. And while they've been in the world Mushoku Tensei is set in, known as the human world, for thousands of years at this point, they usually keep to the demon continent, where the immortal demons still rule. As we see in the prequel story, Old Dragon's Tale, the world Mushoku Tensei is set in was originally part of a set of 6 worlds that were joined together, much like the faces of a cube. Old Dragon's Tale is the story of how 5 of those worlds, including the demon world that Kishirika comes from, were destroyed, with the survivors from each world ending up going over to the human world. That is, the world Mushoku Tensei happens in. Kishirika was just a baby when the demon world ended, and she was a baby because she was very young, not because of one of her resurrections. And she was rescued from the collapsing demon world by a demon king called Necros Lacros, along with Laplace, who is actually the protagonist of Old Dragon's Tale. Now, the immortal demon race are generally physically formidable, though Kishirika herself doesn't seem particularly strong, at least in her child form, given we normally see her needing to be rescued. But despite being strong, they're not smart. And this does tie in with the law of the original 6 worlds, where the humans were the most intelligent and the most advanced in terms of technology and civilization, due to living in the least hostile world and having short lifespans, which promoted rapid advancement. People from the demon world were among the strongest, perhaps second only to those from the dragon world like Orsted and Perugius, because their worlds were full of dangerous demonic beasts, poisonous miasma, and other stuff that would make strength very necessary to survive. Yet, because of their long lifespans, magical abilities, and abundant strength, they were one of the slowest worlds to advance societally, and were really just living in quite a primitive way until the worlds all started to share information and help each other to advance. Since there have been thousands of years since the survivors of the other 5 worlds came to this world, And most characters we see of other races were born in the human world into well-established societies. There's no difference in their intelligence or worldview compared with humans, other than their cultures having developed differently. But the Immortal Demon Kings are characters who were either born in the demon world before it was destroyed, or are the direct children of people who were. So they have this feel of beings that kind of work to a different beat than most of the population. And they do have ongoing soap opera style interpersonal dramas and rivalries between themselves that can span centuries. They can be very loyal, and they do have their own kind of morality, such as in Kishirika's case, always rewarding people who help her. Kishirika casually rewards people with what can end up being life-changing abilities for what seem like very simple things a normal person would have a way to take care of by themselves, and this really shows how strange her view of the world is. Magic demon eyes are something she will exchange for literally donuts, because to her, granting something like that to someone who takes pity on her every time she's hungry is somehow a more appropriate approach than, say, finding a means to make money. We see this in Rudy's case, where he got a powerful demon eye just for giving her food, but we also see it with Roxy at the end of the first season. Roxy could have chosen a demon eye too, but it wouldn't have been a practical solution to any of her current problems, given demon eyes usually take a long time to learn to use. Instead, Roxy got Kishirika to use her own demon eye of clairvoyance to give her information about where Rudeus's family were. In return for Roxy paying the huge bar tab Kishirika ran up by trying to have a drinking contest with Talhand. Now, Roxy probably would have paid it anyway, given it looked like Kishirika was going to be sold into slavery if she couldn't pay, and given Roxy and her party had been among those running up the tab anyway. So even here, we see that Kishirika's rewards are always hugely disproportionate to what the person did for her. She could also very easily earn her own money and not run into any of these problems, just by using her demon eyes to help people for a fee. But Kishirika's version of common sense doesn't allow for that kind of thinking. This could make Kishirika seem like a bit of a convenient character to have in the setting, someone who's always getting into easily solvable problems and will reward anyone who helps her with game-changing abilities or information. But she and her particular quirks are actually baked into the setting and the world building around her and her race well enough that there's enough of her as a character to stop her feeling like a lucky random RPG encounter. I know some people did think Rudeus getting his demon eye for basically no effort was an example of the tired trope where an isekai protagonist gets handed an amazing power just for existing, but I think the author does keep a good balance with this. Kishirika appearing can be a boon to a character, but she's very hard to find if you're actually looking for her, as well as always being somewhere in the most dangerous continent in the world. Additionally, things like Rudeus's demon eye are pretty well balanced. It is a cool ability, but it's immediately shown to be less OP than one might expect when Rudy tries using it in combat against Regerd. For Rudeus, who usually uses magic rather than physical combat, it actually serves more to help him survive in fights that aren't suited to his usual approaches, rather than to make him a cheat swordsman or whatever. The skills Rudeus gained through effort are always those that help him the most, because one of the whole points of the story is Rudeus trying harder in his second chance at life. Things are handed out to him, good and bad, throughout the story, but nothing he gets without working for it ever becomes central to his achievements. And in fact, when he beats Eris using his demon eye when she's been training hard, he realises that he can't put too much of his pride or his reliance on things he didn't earn. We also have to consider that him meeting Kishirika and having food to give her was not a coincidence, but happened on the advice of Hitagami, and so there's a bit more going on there than Rudeus simply having improbably high luck. Hitagami himself could also be seen as a convenient character, but Rudeus is aware of this and made uneasy by it. So we can tell, even just from what's been shown in the anime so far, that things probably aren't going to be as simple as a helpful god giving Rudeus the perfect advice to solve all of his problems. But what do you guys think about Kishirika and her demon eyes? Let me know in the comments. Thank you as always to my supporters on Patreon who are on screen right now, and thank you too to everyone who subscribes to my channel and watches my videos. Don't forget you can also check out my readings of Old Dragon's Tale, and you should find a link to part 1 on the end card right now. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again very soon.